Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating and, honestly, kind of complex geopolitical shifts of late antiquity. We are talking about the Goths. This is a group of people whose journey literally reshaped the entire map of Europe and really laid the very foundations for the medieval world. So, if I ask you who really brought down the Roman Empire, what immediately comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's this image of a massive horde of uncultured, chaotic barbarians just storming the gates of civilization. But what if I told you that the exact same people who sacked Rome were also the ones who ended up preserving its administration, codifying its laws, and creating some absolutely breathtaking works of art? Today, we're totally challenging those old preconceived notions. We're going to track a centuries-long epic of survival, adaptation, and some serious statecraft. To do all that, we're going to follow a quick roadmap. First up, origins, myth versus DNA. Second, the Hunnic catalyst. Third, the Visigoths on the western path. Fourth, the Ostrogoths on the eastern path. And finally, number 5, a lasting cultural legacy. This is going to keep us perfectly oriented as we jump through hundreds of years of shifting borders and changing names. All right, let's just jump right into it. Section 1, origins, myth versus DNA. For literally centuries, historians just kind of relied on this ancient legend from a 6th century writer named Jordanes, and he claimed the Goths originated in Scandinavia and basically migrated en masse across the Baltic Sea to a place he called Gotha Skansa. Now, sure, it made for a great story, right? This idea of a single unified tribe on the move. But modern science has completely flipped the script. Cutting-edge archaeogenomic DNA evidence from a Gothic community in eastern Poland, specifically the Maslemensch group, tells a completely different story. Looking at the 2nd to 4th centuries CE, the Goths weren't this homogeneous, isolated Scandinavian tribe at all. The DNA shows they were incredibly diverse. It was actually this cosmopolitan, multi-ethnic confederation that absorbed all sorts of different people as they moved and grew. Which brings us to Section 2, the Hunnic catalyst. So you might be wondering, how does this diverse confederation end up splitting into two of history's most famously distinct factions? Well, it took a catastrophic pressure from the east to completely upend the geopolitical balance of late antiquity. Sometime in the mid to late 4th century, a terrifying nomadic force known as the Huns started pushing westward from the Eurasian steppe. And this pressure just totally shattered the Gothic world. See, before the Huns showed up, the Goths were loosely divided by geography. You had the Tervingi, a name that likely translates to something like the good or worthy people, and they were hanging out in the forested regions to the west. Then you had the Gruthungi, meaning people of the gravel or steppe, living out in the open grasslands to the east. When the Huns hit, it was devastating. The Gruthungi in the east were basically subjugated. The Tervingi in the west, they had to flee as refugees straight toward the Roman Empire. Over time, these two groups evolved into the specific historical identities we recognize today: the Visigoths, meaning the Western Goths, and the Ostrogoths, the Eastern Goths. Now, to survive this mass displacement, those Visigoth refugees had to figure out how to navigate a rapidly crumbling Roman world. And to do that, they relied on a really crucial Roman treaty status called foederati. Basically, this status allowed allied groups to settle on Roman land and govern themselves autonomously. The catch? They had to provide military service to the empire in exchange. So this wasn't just some blind, chaotic invasion. This was complex, high-stakes diplomacy. The Goths became foederati, cleverly maneuvering within this weakened Roman system to secure land, food, and safety for their people. And in doing so, they fundamentally shifted the geopolitical reality of the entire empire. Let's follow that left branch of our roadmap now. Section 3, Visigoths, the Western Path. The trajectory of their rise to power is just absolutely staggering. Picture this. In 376 CE, they are literally starving, mistreated refugees begging for asylum. Fast forward just 2 years to 378, and they've completely turned the tables, defeating and actually killing the Roman Emperor Valens at the massive Battle of Adrianople. Then jump to 410 CE, under the command of King Alaric I, and they do the unthinkable. They actually sack the city of Rome itself. But here's the thing, they didn't just want to burn everything down. They really just wanted a permanent home. By 418, they are officially settled down as foederati in Toulouse, France. Eventually, they get pushed further south into the Iberian Peninsula, where they set up the incredibly powerful Visigothic kingdom. In 589, they formally convert to Catholicism at the Third Council of Toledo, which really helped unify them with their Hispano-Roman subjects. I mean, they went from being desperate rebels to the creators of the Visigothic Code, which was this brilliantly sophisticated legal system that completely erased the legal distinction between Goth and Roman. Talk about a total glow-up. Moving over to the other side of the family tree, Section 4, Ostrogoths, the Eastern Path. Now, the Ostrogothic timeline is this wild story of liberation and conquest. Remember, they were left behind. So after spending decades subjugated by the Huns, the Ostrogoths finally managed to break free at the Battle of Nidau in 454 CE. This is right after the death of Attila. But their true defining moment? That comes under a legendary leader named Theodoric the Great. And Theodoric wasn't some uneducated warlord. Actually, scratch that, he was basically a Roman insider. He spent his youth as a political hostage over in Constantinople, where he got a first-class Eastern Roman education. He was totally fluent in imperial administration, so much so that he actually marched on Italy with the official blessing of the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno. By 493 CE, Theodoric had completely conquered Italy and set up this incredible Romano-Gothic regime ruled out of Ravenna. He was a true master at blending Gothic military muscle with classic Roman aristocratic administration. But as we know, history keeps moving, and despite their incredible statecraft, neither of these mighty kingdoms lasted forever. Looking at them side by side, the Ostrogoths in Italy were wiped out by the mid-6th century during the absolutely grueling Byzantine Gothic Wars. That's when the Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian decided he wanted to reconquer Italy. The Visigoths, on the other hand, managed to hold on much, much longer over in Spain and Portugal. They ruled there for centuries, right up until their kingdom was largely conquered by the rapidly expanding Umayyad Caliphate in 711 CE. So, what did they leave behind? Section 5. A lasting cultural legacy. I absolutely love this next story. Consider a guy named Wulfula, whose name, by the way, literally translates to Little Wolf. He was an early Christian missionary and a bishop to the Goths back in the 4th century. He realized his people really needed a translated Bible, but he ran into a massive roadblock. There was no written Gothic language. It was a spoken language only. It literally didn't even have an alphabet. So what does Little Wolf do? He invents the Gothic alphabet completely from scratch, just so he can translate the Bible. But here is the most fascinating little detail about his translation. When he was writing it, he intentionally omitted the books of Kings and Chronicles. Why? Well, those books describe the major military exploits of ancient Israel, and Wulfula knew his Gothic people were already incredibly fond of war. He purposefully left the fighting books out of the Bible so he wouldn't encourage their warlike tendencies. How crazy is that? But their legacy goes way beyond just language. The Goths were absolute master craftsmen. Seriously, they were not just raiders. The Visigoths, in particular, were famous for their stunning, intricate goldsmithery. We're talking elaborate belt buckles made of copper alloy, inlaid with beautiful Byzantine-style lapis lazuli and garnets to show off a person's rank. They absolutely loved eagle motifs on their brooches, which became hugely popular across Spain. And their monarchs commissioned these breathtaking pieces like the Treasure of Guarzar. These were magnificent, pure gold votive crowns embedded with precious jewels the kings would actually offer up to the church. Yet, for all that massive cultural dominance, their biological legacy tells a totally different story. When researchers recently looked at DNA from 6th century Visigoths at a burial site in Plani de Horta in Spain, the results were mind-blowing. It turns out that only about 23% of their genetic makeup traces back to Central or Northern Europe. A massive 73% of their ancestry was actually local Northeast Iberian. This data perfectly illustrates how significantly the Visigoths genetically assimilated into the local Hispano-Roman populations over time. So they left this massive foundational, cultural, and legal legacy in Spain, but genetically, they completely blended right into the local population. Which brings us right back to our final thought for today. As we've seen, the Goths were this incredibly diverse confederation. They survived catastrophic Hunnic invasions, they expertly navigated the complex web of Roman diplomacy, they literally invented their own alphabet, created breathtaking art, and established sophisticated kingdoms that successfully bridged the ancient and medieval worlds. So, I have to leave you with this question. Is the term barbarian truly fitting for them, or is it finally time we rewrite the narrative of late antiquity? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning history.